So, welcome everyone to a conversation with Penrith Angling Association. We're joined tonight by Andrew Robinson, who's the secretary of Penrith. Penrith joined us earlier this year. Still, is it Andrew? I think it was earlier this year. Or is it late last year?
Very late last year, I think.
Yeah, very late 2024. So they're a new club to Clubmate, and to be honest, it's been a breath of fresh air working with the guys at Penrith. I think, especially, I think Andrew, you kind of took the lead after you'd kind of come on board, didn't you?
Yeah, it was. I'll talk a little bit about the fishing later on, but the situation we were in was the secretary and his partner had done a sort of amazing job for 26 years, and they brought the club up from, I wouldn't say nothing, but they developed the club into something pretty good, very special, really. Made a lot of money for the club and ran it very much as, I suppose, in an old-fashioned way, and everything was done on paper. All the renewals, all the new members, everything was done by letter and the old-fashioned way. And quite understandably, Andrew, the previous secretary, sort of fairly early on last year, put an email out that he was wanting to step down, just because of the amount of time he'd been doing it. And we then, there was a couple of us co-opted onto the committee, and I still remember vividly Andrew putting up I don't want to say a slide is not the right word, but a thing on the wall in this committee meeting about the jobs that he did and what needed to be done. And excuse my language, but there was almost of a collective sort of holy shit from the rest of the committee, thinking, how the hell do we do that? So fortunately, one of our committee members had already made contact. I'm not sure if it was Rob, had made contact with Clubmate. It might well have been you, Rob, and sort of started making inquiries and spoken to a few other clubs. So it was pretty quickly decided that nobody sort of particularly had the time, and I think also a little bit the inclination to keep running the club the way it was done, because it just incredibly time consuming. So it was sort of batted backwards and forwards over sort of several committee meetings, and it was we agreed to go down the Clubmate route. And I think everybody, again, most people on the committee sort of drew a sigh of breath, thinking, well, that's sorted then. And then it was pointed out that you still sort of needed a secretary, and I was basically the last one standing without a chair. And I didn't object to it, but I sort of put myself forward to do it. And that would be sort of towards the end of that would be sort of probably August, September last year, I think, wasn't it, Jeff? From what I can think it was. So it then had to go to the AGM for ratification, which we got without any problem at all. And then that's really when it started for us. And I mean, I must have been Rob's biggest nightmare, to be honest with you, because I was thinking, I would sort of sat there shaking my head and never off WhatsApp asking.
Guarantee you're not.
Anyway, it certainly seemed.
I'll tell you what, the biggest nightmare is never the person that asks the most questions. It's the one that doesn't ask the most questions.
Right.
Because the biggest nightmare is the club that's got 3,000 members and doesn't ask you what the problem is, and then they come to you and say, "Oh, by the way, we let everyone expire. Everyone's cancelled. No one can buy anything, and the dates are all wrong. We didn't put the right dates on the membership." I wouldn't mind if every single person in WhatsApped me every day, because I know the job was going well. And at the end of the day, as a business, we'd probably make more money, because everyone would be doing it properly.
Exactly.
So just, I just want to kind of take it back a step first. We can kind of get into that, Andrew, but give us a bit more background about Penrith Angling Association anyway. Tell us, if you've got any of the information, kind of tell us, how long the club's been going, what the fishing's like, what you kind of do as a club, how big the club is.
It's well, we capped at 400 members, although we do allow juniors to join. So I think straight away. So at the moment, I think we're around about 410. but we are basically capped at 400 adult members. We got the waiting list has grown exponentially since we joined Clubmate. It used to be between 70 and 80. Now it's north of 130 on the waiting list. But we fit the main part of our fishing. Well, all of our fishing is in the Eden catchment, and the main bit is probably on the River Eden itself. Now that rises high up in the sort of Western Yorkshire Dales, and it runs northwest, really, pretty much north and then a bit west and then north again, to Kirby Stephen, then to Appleby, and then to Penrith where we're based, and then further north in through Carlisle and into the Solway Firth. So it's a big old system. Our fishing starts our top beats are between Appleby and Penrith, and then we've got a couple of beats below Penrith, but we've also got there's two, it seems a bit insulting to call them tributaries, but we've got the River Emont, which runs out of Ullswater in the northeastern Lake District, and the Emont is a lovely river, but it's quite short. It joins the Eden just east of Penrith, and that's an interesting river because it's lake fed. It tends to run clearer than the rest, and it's slower to react from heavy rain. We got the Lowther, which is a smaller river than the main Eden, and that runs out of Haweswater, which is a big reservoir again in the northeastern bit of the Lake District, and a smaller reservoir, and this name makes me laugh. It's called Wet Sleddle, which I think is a great name for a reservoir, and that's pretty much next to Shap. And anybody that's driven across over the M6 knows that Shap's the wettest place in the world. So we got the Eden, the Lowther, and the Emont, and then we've got slightly smaller rivers, the Petrel, which is lower down between Penrith and Carlisle. We've got the bits of the Livenet, which runs into the Eden again between Appleby and Penrith, and that's quite an interesting river because that runs off limestone, and is pretty clear the majority of the time because of the limestone in it, whereas the Eden runs off peat in the high Pennines. So not now, when there's a lot of water in it, there's a lot of colour in it. And then we have little bits of becks here and there, but the main fishing really is on the main stem of the Eden, the Emont and the Lowther. The whole of the Eden catchment, strangely, with the exception of the Petrel, and even the EA don't understand why, but the whole of the Eden catchment is a triple SI and a special area of conservation. And that's because of a variety of factors. It's because of white-clawed crayfish, it's because of brook lampreys, it's because of salmon, it's because of nesting sand martins. It's a huge amount of different stuff in it that causes it to be an SPA. And we also have ranunculus weed and all sorts of things which contribute to it, and you would hope give it maybe a slightly better degree of protection than other rivers. But
a lot of challenges around that about improvements, though. Any kind of projects?
Not particularly. There's a body called the Eden Rivers Trust, who we're starting to work with a bit more closely. They sort of take over the sort of planting, and there's quite a lot of the invasive species, which I can chat a bit later on. But it's not really a challenge. It doesn't really call us challenges to that. And we, as a club, we try and leave pretty much the system as it is, because if you did any bank works, the first big flood in the winter, it'd be gone.
Wipe them out anyway.
And we've taken the attitude, if a tree falls in the river, it stays there, because that's where it should be. And if it happens to end up in Carlisle, well, so be it. Rather than sort of over manicure it. The main fishing is for wild brown trout, and I think it's fair to say we're probably in the sort of Premier League of wild brown trout fisheries. We're very lucky in that respect. And there's a good population of trout throughout the whole system, and there's wild brownies in excess of £5 caught every year, and there'll be bigger ones than that in the system and bigger ones caught every year. There's a good population of grayling, although strangely they don't seem to be spread out through the whole system. You tend to hit patches with good grayling populations and others where it's a bit sparser. General consensus is that the grayling population is probably falling a little bit, which is sad, but there are some good grayling in it. It has a salmon run. The majority of the salmon will run up the main stem of the Eden, and they'll spawn really high up the system, beyond Kirby Stephen up into the Dales. Some of them, good numbers, actually run in the Emont. Some will spawn in the main river of the Emont, and others will run up into Ullswater and then run out of Ullswater into the higher becks to spawn above Ullswater. And then others will run into the Lowther, but they can't enter the lakes because of the two dams, but they spawn in the Lowther. But salmon, I think everybody's probably aware salmon are declining quite a bit, and the runs are sort of variable. The reports are this year there's reasonable numbers of salmon in, but they've been, because of the water conditions we've had, they've been difficult to touch. It's not something that particularly interests me really, but my interest is in the sort of wild browns. There hasn't been any stocking of the river at all since, Jeff might correct me on this, I think 2006, and the Environment Agency, if anybody wanted to stock, which I think they wouldn't, the Environment Agency wouldn't allow it anyway, and I don't think there's any need. So they are pretty much as wild as you can get, which can cause its own problems. So that's a sort of over sort of view of the fishery as such. We own small bits of bank or river, but we rent the majority of it. We've got about, it's a bit of a nightmare. I think we've got about 20 to 30 people we rent water off. Fortunately, there are two big estates that we rent water off, and they probably account for the majority of the water that we have. So that's pretty much an overview of it. The season starts on the 15th of March, and the trout finishes 30th of September. Generally it's fishes a lot better early in the season, and as you get into July, it traditionally gets a bit quiet and a bit stale. Not much happens. We're fortunate. We've got some very good sort of hatches of flying invertebrates. Again, there are indications that might be declining a bit, and there's also indications that we've got to be very careful about the future, because just because it's okay now doesn't mean in 2 or 3 years it'll be all right.
Exactly so.
We have there's a smallish population of chub lower down, but there's some very big ones. There's a few sea trout run the system. They don't tend to come up the river very far, and I think the reason for that is the feed in the river is so good, there's actually no need for a trout to run to sea. There's enough food from in the river, so that sort of explains the fishing. The fishing for trout is fly only. We do allow spinning for salmon, but we've changed the rules at the AGM actually, where you can only use a single barbless hook on a spinning bait, not a treble. You're not allowed to use a treble at all on the river, or on our stretches of the river. And we're sort of constantly looking to sort of try and tweak the rules a little bit to try and improve fish welfare and fish survival really. But that's going to be an ongoing process. So that explains the river and the sort of systems we've got. As I say, then when we started dealing with Clubmate, it worked amazingly well, actually. I mean, out of 400 members, I think I had 2 that were pretty damn obnoxious and pretty unpleasant, and basically got told, if you don't like it, clear off. But I was very pleasantly surprised at how well received it was. I suppose the people that were going to complain probably just complained among themselves, but we did get a lot of people sort of contacting me and other people saying it's sort of really nice to see the club moving forward, and that's not an indication at all of the previous way it was run. It was just, I think a lot of people were glad that the process was simplified for them.
Very long-winded for it. I think sometimes we forget about the members' end of that. Obviously, as a business, we speak to a lot of people in your position, and we talk to you about making your processes easier, saving volunteer time. But for many members, and obviously we see the best and the worst of application processes, but for members, especially in game clubs, it is, as you can probably guess, it's quite common in game clubs because they tend to be just another step slightly more dated than the course angling clubs. You have to find someone to either email or download an application form or pick one up, fill it in, send it to a membership secretary. He has to then ask you for some money. And this is sometimes you have an interview and references, interview and references. Then you have to ask for some money that's either paid by cash, check, bank transfer. The membership guy then has to speak to the treasurer to say, has he paid us? The treasurer then says, yes, he has, or no, he hasn't. Then you communicate again and say, thanks for paying us. We'll now get you a membership. Then we post them a physical membership. Every single one of those stages is a drop the ball stage until perhaps they've actually committed the money. With all respect, they've probably found somewhere else to fish. Whereas, as you're well aware, with the Clubmate process or any online process, and again, we're not here to sell Clubmate on these calls, but in an online joining process, it's less than 1 minute. If you have no restrictions on there, the whole process is done in less than 1 minute. We are disproportionately strong in game fishing. So if you look at our entire client base compared to the clubs in fisheries in England, we are overly strong in game fishing. But they are obviously tend to be lower membership than the big course angling clubs. I mean, Jill's here from Billericay tonight. We're talking 2,500. Game clubs tend to be in the 200 to 400 category for the most part. Just like yours, you're on probably the upper end of game clubs. The really obvious first reason for that is that it costs more. Game clubs are usually significantly more expensive than course angling clubs for the nature of the fishing. So a commitment to our services is less members. It's 1-2 members money at most in some cases, if not half a member for some. Because we do manage some game estates where the rod is £2,000 a year. So our services don't even cost a member. So we are disproportionate, but in a lot of cases, those game clubs, and this is where I'm kind of getting to the point of this, they're struggling for engagement and membership. Now, obviously, the very start of this conversation, you've said that your waiting list is as big as it's ever been. What do you put that down to? Literally the quality of the fishing, or any other factors? Because it bucks the trend of what people think of game fishing as probably the fastest deteriorating part of angling, the one that struggles the most.
I think it's a few things. I think without a doubt, when I joined, I had to print off an entry form off the website. I had to get the signature of a proposer and seconder. I had to get a stamped address envelope. I had to send it off to the secretary, who would send me a letter back and saying, you're on the waiting list, blah, blah, blah. So now,
just as a disclaimer, I wasn't trying to describe the worst application process in fishing and then find out it was you.
Anyway, so now it takes 30 seconds. That's definitely got something to do with it. But I think our greatest sort of strength, and potentially in the future could be a weakness for us, is that wild trout fishing on the fly is very popular. Has become, I think, a few people that used to fish for salmon have come to it, but it's almost like one of the certainly the latest trend in fly fishing. A lot of people will start off on reservoirs and start off on stock fish, and then the sort of natural progression, I suppose, to that is people want to then try and catch wild fish, and to be on your river on your own sort of after a wild fish that you're watching rising is for me, it's a pinnacle. So there's a bit of, I'm sure there's a bit of that. There's a bit of the fact it has become more popular. Social media has definitely taken a big part of it, because certain very well-known fly fishermen will put a picture of a wild brown trout in Cumbria of 4.5, 5 pounds. Lovely photograph of it. Everybody look at that and think, well, that's from the Eden, that. So there's definitely a degree of that as well. So, but
I mean, you are very casually doing a lot of things that clubs, and especially game clubs, aren't doing. You know, the fact that you've even used the words social and media is quite unusual in game fishing. There tends to be this kind of blinkered, old world way of kind of running game clubs, and then one day they poke their head up and go, God, where are all the members? Where's the money? Yeah,
I mean, I'm as bad as everybody else, but if I go to a car park and I see 2 cars at car park, I roll my eyes and go somewhere else, and I don't want to be with anybody else. And trout fishermen do tend to be fairly secretive little hobbit-like creatures that creep about under trees and don't really want to be seen. So there is a degree of that. But so it's great that it's popular, but Jeff, who's on the call tonight, Jeff and I have had a lot of conversations with it over the year. Probably the bulk of our membership are local people that fish less than 5 times a year and might catch less than 5 fish a year. And the club has actually in the constitution of the club, it's for local people. What we're slightly concerned with is, as fishing, whereas a lot of the members were local and wouldn't fish very much, but it's a nice evening, I'll nip down now. We're getting more people in and more people joining that will come up for a whole week, and they'll fish really hard. And the fishing pressure is increasing, which again it's not a bad thing at all in itself. It makes the fishing more difficult, and we're slightly concerned that some of the guys that fish 5 days a year might actually walk away from it. So I think it's one of these things. All I'm trying to say is, you said earlier, Rob, about don't look for problems that aren't there. But I think the last thing we're trying to do is be complacent. We need to keep looking at ourselves, thinking, do you know what, we've lost, and that's, again, without blowing smoke up you, that's the beauty of Clubmate, is I can look and say, do you know what, we've lost, I don't know, we would average, on average a year, we'd lose 30 to 40 members on average.
10%, 8%, 7-8%.
Yeah. So what Clubmate will give me the advantage to do, if I can look at that now and say, right, we've lost 40 members. If we lose 40 members in sort of February next year, I can look at that and think, Christ, 80% of them are locals or something. It gives us that ability to sort of look at how things are going, really. That's what I
here's a statistic for you, right? This is a really interesting one, and one we're actually using the Clubmate system to kind of investigate. The Environment Agency, I had a conversation with the Environment Agency recently, and they claim that nearly 30% of rod license holders churn every year.
Right.
So there is a 30% change in rod license holders in the UK every single year. And when I first had the conversation, I was like, get out of here. No way on earth there are 30% of anglers. And the problem is, my first response was, if I looked at Clubmate and various clubs and big clubs, small clubs, they all remain around the same number, members per year.
Yeah.
But because you're, and especially a lot of volunteer clubs, as long as you've got the money, you don't care who they are.
Yeah.
You don't look into whether it's the same 2,000 members. You don't care whether they're the same 2,000 members. And my first response was, no way. No way on earth do 30% of rod license holders churn every year. And they said, I promise you it is. I said, okay, well, so we're doing some research into member turnover at angling clubs in different categories, whether it's course or game or whatever it might well be. Yeah. Because it's very easy for us to pluck that information across the whole client base, for us to... with no need for personal data, we can just say who was new and who wasn't, rather than have individual names and client data. But that's really interesting, because that would put you far below the average of rod license turnover. You're probably sat there thinking, God, that's a high figure. We lose 30 a year, whatever it is, 30, 40 a year. But that would be a third of how many rod license holders churn over every year.
And
it'll be something we'll report back on, when we actually do find the figures, because I've promised the EA and the Angling Trust that we'll do a bit of a piece for them on it. So,
but when we did the change over to Clubmate, when we started doing the renewals, I think last year we lost about 50, and I think quite a lot of that was there'll be quite a few people that have got that actually, you know what, a change over to going online might be a time for me. They were probably going to finish anyway, and there might have been a few more that finished a year or two early. So, but I think it's useful for that. But the most interesting thing of all is when we started the move to actually get people to. I mean, I used to sit here in my hands with a cup of tea at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when somebody had put his picture profile as of a sheep, and I just give up. But a lot of the feedback I was getting was, oh, this is going to make the club more impersonal. We're going to lose that contact that we had with the old secretary, and it's all going to be on. And I'm not. But not. They said wouldn't go as far to say they're unhappy, but it's a bit impersonal. And what about contacting the secretary and whatever? Actually, the previous secretary said in quite a few meetings before he resigned, or before he finished, that he'd actually given up trying to do social things because nobody was interested.
There's a remarkable, I can't put words on it, to be honest, sometimes, but the people that never respond to social events, who don't turn up at meetings, who won't go to the AGM, that will never respond to anything, then tell you it's impersonal to make the joining process online. And I had this conversation quite a lot recently, and I think I spoke about it in one of the webinars recently. I've had a couple of clubs said, like, the members might be concerned about this impersonal way of joining. And what I will always push back to that, all you've got is a transactional conversation. They're only calling you because you can sell them a membership.
Yeah.
And when you save 80% of all the time spent going to the post office and selling books and driving around, you can just choose to ring them. You've got a system that gives you their phone number, their email address. You can email them at the touch of a button. Instead of having to speak to them all in a week in May, when you've got to sell them all their memberships, you can just choose to go fishing and speak to them, And this is what I've pushed back to quite a few, is like, you've now got the choice to just be a better fishery manager instead of being, all those conversations. And what that member, the members that have probably said that to you, they want to talk at you. They don't want to talk with you. They're not on about talking with you. They want to talk at you. You can just either ring them yourself. The secretary that's now got loads more time on his hands can just sit there one day and go, I'll tell you what, I'm going to ring 10 members to see what they're up to. Or you can just go out and walk. You can just go walk, because you're not sat there scribbling on bits of paper or, reconciling spreadsheets.
Well, it's interesting, actually. What's happened from this sort of, it's going to be impersonal, I get a feeling it's completely gone the other way, actually. We've had a few jobs recently. We had a pair of beavers decided to dam one of our rivers. We've got potentially the dueling of the A66, Scotch called it a Penrith, which is effectively one of our car parks. And we've had lost landing nets. We've had quite a few things recently. And actually, it is so easy to email the members, contact the members.
Stunningly easy.
Yeah, and it not only has it made life incredibly easy for me, but actually the feedback we're getting back now is, oh, that's brilliant, thanks for that. And people are, rather than 400 people saying, oh, whatever, there's that beaver dams is a classic example. Rather than 400 people sort of whining about it, I've had emails back saying, thanks very much for the way you've dealt with this. And I've had one person saying, can't we shoot them? And when you actually explain the situation to them, the general feedback is actually really good. And people are saying to me now that it's really that they're getting information real time, much quicker. And where the old secretary would have to do like 8 bunch emails or something, now I just got bing bang and it's gone. And I mean, they're probably thinking, oh God, he's off again. But it's just that part of it has not only made my life a huge lot easier, but I think it's definitely engaging more people with the club now. And I'm getting people now messaging me where they wouldn't have done in the past. So that's been a massive plus.
Don't ever forget what I like to call Dave down the pub syndrome.
Yeah,
because the members are actually usually Dave down the pub. You know, it's the one guy that likes to be vocal all the time, that moans about every tool. And as soon as Dave and two of his mates, all of a sudden the committee worry that it's all of the members. And it's not, because most of them are very happy going fishing. You know, they're sat there going fishing, did their membership and went, God, that was easy. You know, and as with any kind of service, I know we're all volunteer angling clubs, but as with any service, good service is always silent. You know, no one feeds back on good service. They feed back on bad service. So most people won't say anything and won't speak to you. So moving on, what's it like this year? What's the fishing like? What's the club been like? And what are the plans? You know, what have you got going on?
Right, it's been an interesting one. We had low water from opening day, which was the 15th of March, and the first sort of right into really beginning of June, the fishing's been outstanding. We had low water, lovely conditions, good hatches of fly, and everybody was saying that the river was busier than it normally would be. I think that it was generally excellent, really, really, really good. We started to have lifts in water sort of mid-June, I think it was, and it's pretty much gone downhill then. Really, it's not been great, but that would be. We have what we call the dog days of summer, like sort of late July, August, where it's always pretty poor and pretty dead. That probably happened a bit earlier this year. Went on for a bit longer. Now, after spending the last 5 months whining about no water, we're besieged with the stuff now. So the fishing has been really very good. A lot of people fishing. Again, going back to sort of Clubmate side of it, the committee is sort of settled down is not the right word, but the committee is now seems to be sort of happy the way things are going, and we've now got a maintenance sort of maintenance subcommittee that do some work for us. We're looking to expand things quite a lot. Looking into the future, we're sort of looking at taking on more water for a couple of reasons, really, because some of it's very nice and why we're in a position to do it, so why don't we? I had a conversation with Rob earlier on. Some of that is going to have to be balloted to a certain number of members a day. Again, and one of the reasons I think that never happened in the past, because it would have been so difficult. But now, using Clubmate, I'm sure with Rob's guidance, it's going to be a hell of a lot easier. And then the way I want to try to move, we've got an AGM in October. I'm sort of new chairman-elect is on this call. And I'm really looking forward to working with Jeff. What I'd really like to try and do over the next year is, having sort of settled down and sort of got the club bedded down a little bit, and working with Clubmate, we really want to sort of try and push some initiatives with landowners, with the Eden Rivers Trust. One thing that does, I think, concerns everybody, whether people agree with it or not, whether it's global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it, it is starting to affect us quite a lot. We're definitely getting long drought periods, warm periods, and I think it's pretty well accepted. There's a tipping point when the water reaches like 20 degrees. It can be really dangerous to salmon, trout, and especially grayling. We're looking at perhaps introducing some protocols where we have to call an end to fishing. So if we start getting extreme summers like we've had, we're going to have to work out a fair protocol where, look, it's been like this for 2 weeks now. There's no sign of any rain. You're going to have to stop. I mean, most people will anyway, but we need to do something like that. We're working with the Eden Rivers Trust about mink control. We have a system where we do not whole catchment counts, but large catchment counts of cormorants and gooseanders. We've just got a license through to cull the same number that we were allowed to do last year. It would be nice to it would be nice to do some sort of actually work on the riverbanks, especially planting, to try, and there's a lot of evidence now in Scotland that if you're shading, especially the tributaries, the small fish have more of a chance in to avoid the sort of water heating too much. So there's lots of things we'd like to do. It's just whether as a club with so many different landlords we're going to be in a position to do that, I'm not sure, but that's the way we'd really like to try and take it forward over the next few years. The beaver situation is a classic example. That is a pair of beavers escaped and are now living wild on the River Lowther. It's not a secret, it's well known. And the estate is very pro them. We've got to work around them. In fact, if you go back to that previous picture, Rob, that's really quite interesting. Actually, this was a partial dam that they built. It's actually been washed away now, but this was in a period of really low level, and that was on quite a canal-y stretch of the river. And even what the little work they've done there, the water in front of the dam is naturally deeper than it would have been, and you've got quite a nice riffle of oxygenated water going where they've constricted the river. So in a period of low flow, they've actually improved the habitat for trout in that one small stretch. Now, I'm sure 375 members would disagree with me, but there are places and times where stuff like that is probably going to be a good thing. So I think we've got to, as a club, we've got to embrace there will be beavers on some of our tributaries in 15, 20 years, and we've got to live with it. And I'd much rather we embrace that and understanding than just the old way is always to fight it, isn't it? It's a bit the same with cormorants and gooseanders and everything else. Kill them all, kill them all, kill them all. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But if you can develop what we're doing, like whole river counts, produce photographic and video evidence of what we're seeing, and we are getting Natural England to actually issue us some licenses to do something about it. So that's the way I'd sort of like to try and take the club in the future.
I mean, for anyone that attended the fishery management conference, I think 2 weeks ago now, we obviously discussed, the challenges behind anglers that publicly say they want to shoot everything that moves.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen, first, and it's not going to make us any more popular, second. But responsible fishery management when it comes to habitat works and long-term planning. One of the things I said on that call, it's always been challenging for angling clubs in its kind of traditional mindset, because we all get voted on and off every year. Because we're all voted, and I'm still chairman of my club, we all get voted at every AGM. So you don't make a 3-year plan, you make a 1-year plan, because you might get sacked next year. And I think sometimes we've got to get to the stage that this committee model as it was previously just doesn't work in the modern world very well, because you can't run a fishery on a 1-year plan. You need to be thinking of 3 to 5 year kind of plans for habitat improvement. The Environment Agency will tell you, and a lot of anglers will say, it's just it's misdirection, that climate change is the biggest problem. It really is. It really absolutely 100% is the largest problem in angling, is the encroaching climate change problems, because the increases in temperature are causing not only obviously poorer river conditions, lower oxygen levels. It's also causing a northern migration of fish. It will cause over decades, over decades and hundreds of years, it will cause all fish to move away from the kind of equator and move north, which is going to be very challenging. It's increased the salinity of water, because in warmer water, the more saline tidal barriers, the saline solution is moving further upstream every year, which is encouraging tidal invasiveness from species such as crabs. So there's so many challenges out there related to climate change, and obviously low oxygen levels will kill every fish in your river a lot quicker than an otter or a beaver or a cormorant. When we reach really low oxygen levels and we have those storms and we get an oxygen crash, it will kill every fish you have immediately. So robustness, like the shading that you've spoken about, is key. Habitat in the river, riffles, passes, all these kind of things are key. I already think it stands out that Penrith is a club that's thinking about the future of its sport, which stands out itself from a lot of game fishing clubs. Another part that I'd be interested in is those juniors, Andrew. obviously you said you've got a membership cap, but you remain open for juniors. And I've just been reminding myself of the cost, but you charge next to nothing either for juniors.
£10.
Is £10, which is essentially, you know, cost of doing business, you know, processing the kid basically. Do you do anything with them? You know, do you rather than, you know, it's great that you let them all join all year round for such a low fee, but is there any targeted kind of plan with the juniors, or is it just kind of keep trying to get them?
There isn't at the moment, but it's something we're definitely talking about. Most of the, again, without looking at all the membership, the vast majority of our junior memberships will be sons of or relations of members. Now, that's fine, but we really do need to sort of try and introduce more. We've actually got access to some brilliant coaches, instructors. It's trying to work out the sort of not the logistics of doing it. If we took five or six youngsters from Penrith College and took them down the river with 5 instructors, without being rude about the instructors, they ain't going to catch anything. No, it's the nature of our fishing. So I think what would be nice in the future is we have a couple of little ponds, small lakes where you can go and catch something. And I think you could teach casting basics very easily, but also it's a bit equivalent to your pole, like the first thing you do is a pole fishing, actually to get them to catch something, which isn't too difficult, and it's something we definitely are thinking about. Interestingly, there was a call for, the committee was short last year, which ended up me and Jeff and I getting co-opted on. And our last committee meeting, I think we're 3 or 4 people, maybe even more short. And I put a message out for people wanting to join the committee, it would be interested, and expecting 0, and actually was quite blown away. The amount, not so much the amount of people, but the people that contacted me saying that they would be interested now or in the future, with not a CV, but saying that they would really like to get involved. 2 of whom are keen to work with youngsters. So it's very, very early days, but it's something that we definitely need to work on. We're in a lucky position that if and when, or should maybe never, some water came up, we would probably be in a position to buy it. And long term, if we could buy some water, and if it had really good access, so much the better, then we would be again in an even better position to actually start doing stuff like that. At the moment, most of our car parks are sort of access to 3 or 4 cars only, some of them quite a long walk down to the river, and not ideal for that sort of thing. So it's in our mind that it's certainly something we'd want to do in the future.
Excellent to hear. I mean, it is one of the major challenges. Obviously, we do an awful lot around participation in terms of partnerships and inclusion, all the rest of it. But game fishing is where the challenge lies. And obviously, like you've just said, you've got areas where you could probably get kids to catch fish quite quickly. But I would still say game fishing, due to the nature of fly fishing, is probably an older start. You can put a whip in a kid's hand at 4, 3, 4 years old, and they will catch a roach or a gudgeon, or whatever it might well be. So it's probably an older start, so you're already behind the times, kind of thing. And then obviously there is this kind of perception of elitism in game fishing. It is obviously more expensive for clubs that don't price it as keenly as you do, but especially if your dad can't afford a hundreds of pounds game ticket, it's more expensive. Course angling clubs still 50 quid, 50, 60 quid. If your dad can't pay hundreds of pounds for a game ticket, you're not getting a tenors junior ticket anyway, are you? So it is one of the areas of the sport that has got the biggest challenge in participation, because on top of the climate change issue, and just to peg predators slightly further down and all the issues that anglers say are the worst, climate change and participation are the 2 biggest issues. Because if the climate changes that much, there are no fish and there are no anglers left, we're in trouble. Doesn't matter how many otters and cormorants and everything else we've got, if there is no climate and no anglers, So it's good to hear that it's on the roadmap, and I'm really interested in working out if we can. And one of the benefits of us being connected to so many different aspects of the sport, whether it's course, game, carp, whatever else, is trying to connect clubs to each other. As I mentioned before everyone came on, Andrew, my club's going to collaborate with a local game angling club next month to take all of our junior kids the opportunity to go fly fishing on a lake, which they don't usually get access to. And it's a club whose membership is £300-400 a year. So the kid's never going to, pay for this, and dad's not going to do it. And these exchanges with game clubs or vice versa is something we're really interested in driving. So it's something I think we can definitely support with. And I think it's key. One of the benefits of these calls is there are all different types of club on this call right now. And in your normal day-to-day life, course angling committees don't speak to game angling committees, and they certainly don't speak to carp fisheries. Carp fisheries don't speak to anyone because they just want to do their business. And I think we've got to keep, collaborating these communities and working together, because the sport has got to unite and connect over these things. And I think we've got to move game fishing into the general audience a bit more than it has been in the past few decades.
Yeah, I mean, what I've thought over the last few weeks, actually, sort of upstream of us, we've got Kirby Steve, Appleby, who are on Clubmate, and then upstream of them, we've got Kirby Stephen, and there'll be a number of people, or a surprising amount of people, that are members of all three. I mean, just how much water do you need? But you know what it's like. I don't try that. But what I have thought actually again is trying. I'm sure like Appleby and Kirby Stephen would be in the same position as us. I mean, they're smaller clubs than us. I think they're both. I think one's about 100 and one's about 80 members. But again, to try and tie in something. Actually, Kirby Stephen have got the ideal place to teach people on the road. At Eden Park, and I think they do sort of club days. That it would be an ideal actually to actually get the three clubs together.
Do like exchange bookings for events and things like that.
Exactly, but certainly on the young
shared coach resources, because one of the challenges is volunteers. As because you've spoken about with the committee, and committees are one thing, but coaches are another. Coaching can be quite intimidating. I know Ulvis is on this call, who's obviously the client engagement manager, but he's also my head of coaching. Trying to get effective coaches that want to continue coaching is incredibly difficult. So if you can get three clubs coaches to coach all three and move around as a traveling kind of circus, so to speak, you're going to have a lot more impact than each coach. Every club in this country is not going to have coaches. You're not going to get every club in this country to either pay for or work with coaches. So if you can kind of club together everyone's coaching, and work in areas like yourself, Kirby and Appleby, could be a great initiative.
I mean, cost is an interesting thing with youngsters. I mean, our local membership at the moment is 104 quid, which I think is a bit of a steal for what everybody get. The country, what we call the country members, people that live outside the area, I think it's 100. I can't remember what it is now. 120, I think, at the moment. The juniors is 10, and juniors are £10 up to, I think, the age of 21 or 22. Is it, Jeff? I can't remember what it is now. I think it's
21. Well, the reason we did that, Rob, it was years ago, and it was because we found once they were reaching school leaving age, we lost them.
They just dropped off completely.
Because maybe they couldn't afford it, just got a job, poor wages or whatever, and they couldn't afford it. So we changed to 21 to try and give them a chance to get established in life, if you want, before they have to pay the full fee. Yeah,
I don't know whether I'd recommend maybe scaling that up slightly, having a step-up membership from like 17, 18 to 21. I mean, great for the sport, but if they're still dropping out at 21, maybe you'd have to look at the metrics. You've got the metrics now. Are they still going, well, 10 to 120, hell with that, I'll just go at 21 instead of, I've just had 3 more years cheap fishing, and £10 a member is not going to change your club metrics. And yes, it's great if you then keep them at 21. They're established and they can afford it and they can carry on. And I'm talking to the air here. I'm not saying you should do anything or that's actually true, but are you still losing them at 21 for a tenner? And they went, God, that was cheap, wasn't it? Look at these guys are giving us until 21 at 10 quid. So maybe a phased membership, a step up from 18 to 21, where at least they're paying something that you can invest into the club and invest in the younger ones. We've started kind of charging like an annual pass for our juniors that are doing more. you know, 30, 40 quid to attend coaching sessions to reinvest in the real first time kit, you know, to reinvest in the first time kit. Because, you know, I mean, 18 to 21-year-olds should have some kind of income, you know, and, you know, they're spending their money on something. And it does seem very cheap at 21, but it's your, you know, it's your decision. That's exactly the freedom of the system and all those kind of things. Do you want to sum up for us, Andrew? Give us a sum up of how you feel at the moment about the club, and, you know, next year, the year coming, the renewal period, and then we'll do a bit of a Q&A if anyone's got any questions.
I'm very when I took over as secretary, I remember driving back home and getting back home and said to Fiona, my wife, "As you're not going to believe this, I'm secretary," and she thought I was only about 50 members, so that was a bit of a thing. My first reaction was, "Don't cock it up." That's all I could think. Do not cock this up. Which is my sort of, but actually over the next few weeks I sort of came to conclusion, and the previous secretary was called Andrew. I said, I'm not going to be Andrew. I can't be Andrew. I can't do what he did. I'm just going to have to do, it's going to have to change. It's going to have to do it how I want to do it. And if you don't like it, tough. But and I feel very, I would say that I was really, I shouldn't have been surprised, but I'm really pleasantly surprised how everybody took to it, really. I feel much more confident in what we're doing. Everybody seems pretty relaxed about it. I did bump into somebody the other day who's been a club member for 26 years, hasn't got a bank account, still can I still pay cash next year? And then we go, yeah, of course. There's still the odd anomaly there, here and there, but I feel very sort of chilled about it now. I'm slightly nervous about I don't want to mess up the renewal system next season. We had, Rob might be correcting me in this, I think we had 23-ish membership categories, some of which we didn't have any members in. So that's going to the AGM next month. That's going to be knocked down to 5. We're trying to simplify things and membership categories. We're simplifying.
This one blows me away. You know, going down from 23 membership categories to 5 is the single best decision you will ever make in your life.
Yeah.
And as I've said to you before, Andrew, 23 is nowhere near the most. You know, you sit there and you think we've got the most complicated system on earth. It's nowhere near the most that we've got on our system at all. But anyone, and even in very large clubs, anyone that's got over teen figures, you know, anyone that's got over kind of 14, 15 categories is making their life hard, because you're trying to niche people into categories for no reason. And all you're doing is giving your members 20 options to renew, and they will click the wrong one in a lot of cases. That's the best news I heard all year when you told me, because I thought, these guys have got it right. You know, simplifying rather than adding things. Absolutely will change your life. So when they renew, instead of having this massive, great big presentation of which one am I, they just go, that's easy. You know, I just pick that one. So best thing you've ever decided to do. I've always said, like, I get the kind of local reasons, you know, when you've got your local and your country, as you call it, but inside and outside membership. As a very connected business as we are, that we're trying to connect the sport nationally and internationally to an extent. And personally, in the way I've operated at my own club, I don't understand it, because yes, I guess you want to preserve it for your locals, but why charge more for people that are willing to drive further and fish less? You know, I've kind of said this to clubs before, and I get that you've kind of got locals that don't fish much and they fish in a more relaxed manner. And maybe I can have a think about the pressure of game fishing, as you say, you know, they come and fish it really hard for a holiday kind of thing. But I see it in a lot of course angling clubs where there is no such pressure, you know, kind of thing. There is no such pressure. And I always think, and there are ones that still got the old fashioned, you've got to live within X miles of the post office. And someone asked me if I can facilitate that in Clubmate, and I said, I'll give you 2 guesses. No, I can't. No, I can't sell memberships based on how close you are to the post office.
It is. I mean, for example, I mean, I live, the nearest stretch of river for me is about 5 minutes away, or slightly less, slightly more, maybe 10 minutes away. I mean, as a local member, paying less than somebody that lives in London, I could fish it 7 days a week. So,
the availability of fishing, you know, even if you don't go, that's your choice. I've always, you know, at my club, I've got people that drive, you know, again, we control Ferry Meadows Country Parks, the biggest bream water in England, really. You know, it's the most popular bream water in England. There are guys that travel 4 hours each way to fish that for a match.
Yeah.
Now, why would I charge that guy more?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, he's going to come less. You know, he comes for the occasional match because he loves the place.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, and I'm not tarring any of your members with this, I speak more from a personal perspective, they're nicer about it. You know, they're more polite about it. They're more grateful for the work that you do. The locals take you for granted a little bit. You know, they've always lived there. You're new to them, you know, Andrew. You know, you're newer than the water is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, yeah, but that's something to think about as we become more connected. The question is, what is local? You know, what is local? If, you know, if it's all on there, you know, what is local? You know, it's wherever you're willing to drive to, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, really interesting. So let's go to a bit of a Q&A then. Has anyone got any questions for Andrew about Penrith or anything that's been spoken about tonight, or examples from your own club that are similar? You must have done a really good job, Andrew.
They're all the same.
Andrew, I've got a question, Andrew.
Yeah.
You were very, very similarly placed to yourself. We have our AGM October, November.
Yeah.
1st of January starts the angling year, and we're thinking now about Clubmate, August, September. What was the elapsed time for you to become competent, and what was the commitment? I mean, our thinking is we may go live 1st of July because we'd have got the bulk of the issues out of the way, and we'd then be dealing with a very small number, although some data transfers would be required.
Lie, Andrew. Lie. No, tell him the truth. Tell him the truth.
We make. I think the our AGM is actually. I've got it wrong. Our AGM is written in the rules. It's got to be in November for some reason. But actually, our AGM last year was in October, and the decision was made then, and we sort of started going with it, and so we started. I can't remember the date we started doing the memberships, but it was before the season started in March. It was like February, March, I think. So it was fairly rushed. There was plenty. That gave us plenty of time. The only thing that slowed it down and made it difficult, and I put both hands up and surrender here, is I wasn't prepared enough. Because of what I do outside of fishing, October, November, December, January, I train gun dogs for a living. So October, November, December, January is a nightmare for me. I wasn't prepared enough, and suddenly halfway through January and beginning of February, my head was falling off because I'm thinking, oh my God, actually, if I prepared better and had not learnt Clubmate, but if I'd actually had the time or made myself sit down and go through the sort of videos online and the explanations online, which are brilliant, to be honest with you. All you need to do is Google them or go on the site. It would have been a lot easier, and that was because I was poorly prepared for it. Actually, the transfer was very easy. Once I'd sort of sat down and spoken to Rob and we'd worked out, we'd actually put up the membership categories and done it. It was very easy. One thing that stuck in my mind, a couple of things that stuck in my mind was Rob said, don't help them too much. And I probably did. And even now, I'll get an email and I'll look at it on my phone and send it, I'm trying to join and I can't. And I put my phone away and I look at it half an hour later. Oh, I've managed to do it. They can do it, but the first thing is to get hold of you. I want to be a member. I can't do it, and then you'll get an email saying, "Oh, such and such has joined," and whatever. And what's happened is they've actually, because I've not answered the phone or not answered them immediately, they've sat down and worked it out. And there was a lot of that going on.
In cases, it's resistance.
Yeah.
And you know, anyone here that's got a Facebook group and you put an event on there and say it's 10 till 4 and the first comment is, what time does it start? It's resistance, and you know, I just don't want to do it that way. And as Andrew said, and to be fair, I could tell Andrew was stressed. And I knew it wasn't necessary. You know, I've done this hundreds of times. I've done it with my own club that's in the thousands. You know, I've done this hundreds of times at Clubmate. Just let them join. Because Andrew was emailing me with, and I hope you don't mind this, Andrew, but Andrew's emailing me with, this one says his email address won't work, and this one says his phone number won't work. And, you know, I said, just leave them. I promise you they will be fine. And when you start taking yourself away from that and not trying to micromanage the system, which is exactly what it's designed for, as Andrew said, 10 minutes later, they'll have joined. You know, it's because they refuse to read. You know, most of them will, you know, a lot of members will even refuse to read the button that says, please press here. And I saw one yesterday with one of our clients, and I won't say who it was. I always look at some of the socials and stuff. I'm trying to book a day ticket and I don't know how to pay. And he put the screenshot up, and the guy that manages their club said, you press that button at the bottom that says pay here. And that was the entire solution. The guy said, oh, great, thanks, I've done it now. And the entire solution was he couldn't figure out the button that said pay here at the bottom of the screen. And there is an inherent laziness to some people. But let's remember, Andrew, although you felt really under the cosh, most of your members were fine. You know, you end up getting the pressure of maybe 10, maybe, and as soon as you get to 10, and this is similar for us as a business, right? So we can sit there with our support inbox, and you guys are all messaging support tickets. And if we get to a day that there's like, you know, 12, you think, God, the system must be having a meltdown, you know, it's all going wrong and all this kind of thing. And remember, we've got 350 clients, 2,000 admin users and 100,000 anglers, and we're worrying about 12. You know, and I'm thinking, it's not actually that bad. I'm actually listening to 12 people. And again, this isn't designed to be disparaging. It's more the fact that some people just like to mess around with the system more. We speak to the same clubs over and over and over and over and over again. You know, of all of our support tickets, 75% of them probably come from 20 people, 20 clubs, you know, 20 club owners, admins like Andrew. These people just like tweaking things to an extent. There aren't any problems that only affect one club. You know, if the system's broken in some way, it's broken for everyone. You know, if messaging doesn't work, it doesn't work for anyone. And there is no chance whatsoever that the same 20 clubs are going to come in the support inbox over and over again. It's just because they like doing things. And a lot of them are actually questions around, how do I do this? Can we do something different? Our actual support problems are nearly nil. And in the last 12 months, and I think, Andrew, you've probably noticed the kind of reliability, I hope, but our support metrics in terms of reviews, and you'll have all, the current clients will have noticed you get your little MPS score every now and again, your 0 to 10, has been exceptional this year, because there are literally nearly no kind of actual support problems. And we've done a lot more of this, you know, talking about how clubs are operating, what you can do with the future and how we can support that. Anyway, back to Andrew and Bob. Bob, have you got any other questions for Andrew?
I had a couple of buttes. I had a guy who rang me about 7:30 one night. Your system doesn't work. I work in IT. I'm telling you, it doesn't work. And I said, well, I think it does. No.
They're the worst ones. The ones that tell you they work in IT are always.
I work in IT. I'm telling you now, it doesn't work. Right. What's your name? So fired up the laptop with his name. I said, well, it would help if you use the right email, wouldn't it? I mean, it was as simple as that. And the other thing is as well, let's say a ballpark figure of out of 100 emails I dealt with, no, I'm not saying it'll be 100, nearly half of them would have been from 3 people. I mean, there were certain people that never off, and you thinking, for God's sake. And actually, I got to the stage as well. Well, Rob said a thing earlier, he called it picnic. The problem's in the chair, not the computer. And that absolutely sums it up. So, I mean, it was actually remarkably easy. And it was my fault entirely because of the time of year. I wasn't prepared enough. That's the only comment I'd make, really, Bob, to be honest with you.
I just had one more question, sorry.
Yeah.
I know, I mean, the website you've got is brilliant in terms of the detail, the extensive nature of it. And I can understand why in year one you wouldn't want to touch that in any way. Do you think at some point, because of the sheer volume, would you retain that, or is the Clubmate website offering would be assessed at some point?
I've got to be careful here because Jeff here does the website, and I think he does an amazing, he does an amazing job of it. But I think the general consensus will probably leave it. We'll probably leave it as it is. I mean, I'm not saying certainly we will probably tweak it. We'll probably change a bit for it, but Rob might disagree, but I don't think it certainly doesn't do us any harm. I don't think the initial contact for Clubmate comes through the website. It's people. The first contact I would think is people Google Penrith Angling, and then from the front page they can join Clubmate.
So we will. One thing I think we're very strong for is honesty and transparency. You know, we have never tried to sell a website to someone that's got a good one. You know, if you've got a lot of data on your website, you've worked really hard on it, someone runs it really well and it's cheaper, we won't even have the conversation. We'll tell you to keep it. You know, we're not here to sell. We're not salesmen. If you've already got an established website that runs well for you, keep it. The only other times we tend to move people if they have no website at all. They have got a website that's built by someone who's disappeared and they never speak to him anymore, and God knows how you ever change the content, so it's ridiculously outdated. And if you don't want to manage it at all, because obviously we can manage the website, you know, we can do managed service for the website and make any changes and things like that. But if you've got a website that works for you and it's got all of your information on, keep it. Although the one thing I would say, if you are very protective of member content and at the moment you've tried to kind of bodge that into a website, removing your members content or having a much simpler website like our Essentials one, for example, and then keep all your content in Clubmate as a member-only tile kind of thing, can make it members-only content for people who have joined through the system, rather than trying to bodge your website into a members area, things like that, because it doesn't tend to work that well. But if you've got a decent website, then keep it, because we're not here to sell stuff. You know, we're not here to try and make people move. But our websites are very good. You know, we probably provide websites for 130, 140 different fisheries, and they are very aesthetic. They work very well, very simple and very cheap. But if you're happy, keep the one you've got. Any other questions then? Has anyone got another question for Andrew before we leave tonight? Well, we'll call it a night then. It's been really interesting, Andrew. Thank you very much.
Hold on. So as a fishery,
Orvis is having a go now. Go on, Orvis.
Well, I have to ask questions. So as a fishery point of view, what do you think will be your biggest stepping stone for next season, you know, for the seasons upcoming? You know, what's the thing what you as a club need to overcome to function better and to attract more members in a way?
I think really we would like to, if we can find, it sounds a bit greedy, if we can find some more water, that would be, I'm not saying that will happen next year, but that will certainly be a that will be certainly be a progress. We are, as I touched on it a few times earlier, we're concerned about fishing pressure because if you approach a wild trout on the 15th of March, you've got to be reasonably careful. If that thing's been fished for a lot over the next month, 6 weeks, maybe even caught once, they get progressively harder. Not get
anywhere near them. You won't even see them.
So we're very conscious of the sort of fishing pressure, and we've got something like 43 miles of fishing, but probably less than probably about pushing half of that would hardly be touched. And there will be 3 or 4 places which get an extreme amount of pressure. So what we would like, I think what we'd all like to try and do is to try and alleviate some of that fishing pressure to get other stretches fished more, especially some of the smaller streams, which can provide lovely sort of sport. And again, it is, I haven't really sort of mentioned this to the committee at all, but it is in my mind actually to whether we could do something like a cheaper, I say I don't think £104 of a season ticket is particularly a lot of money for what we provide, but whether we can provide a ticket where, like a small water ticket, where for a much smaller price, people that on our waiting list can get to fish some of our waters which are hardly touched. I mean, that would be really, if we could work a system and get people interested in that, that would be a great start.
think we
And
had
then-
a little bit of a discussion about it, didn't we? About like new ideas for, you know, if you can do anything different with whether it's part seasons or
Yeah,
off peak. You know, we were talking about off peak, I think, didn't we? I think we had a
Yeah.
discussion on maybe do a Monday to Thursday ticket, for example, where you can only fish it Monday to Thursday on the quieter days of the week.
that's
Yeah,
right.
I
I
mean-
mean, what we could do if I mean, I would, depending how things work, I would say that the people joining the waiting list this week, I think they're probably looking at 3 years before they get into the club. I mean, some of them in 3 years would have emigrated, given up, whatever. But it is quite a long time. And what I was thinking is if we can have some sort of a system where certainly, like, I don't know, even the top 30 or 40 people on the waiting list that are going to get on next year, whether the year before that we could sell them a sort of small waters ticket or something like that. That's one thing in my mind, really. But I still, it sounds a bit conservative, a bit boring, but I'm still a bit in the don't cock it up mode. And I'm sure I'll be more confident next year and whatever. But
I guarantee you, when you've gone through your 5 membership plans and your first renewal year, you'll find it much easier.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the best example on this call probably is Jill, because she's got the most members in this call. But once you get to the second year, it's a lot easier. You know, it just most of it manages itself. And I remember Jill this year saying to me, "Can you keep an eye out on renewal day?" And nothing happened. You know, we just sat there and watched money happen. You know, we just sat there taking money for the most part. And we're talking in that scale a lot of money very quickly. You know, significant amounts of money very quickly. And again, not trying to sell anything, but the system does allow you very quickly and very kind of smoothly to do things like that. You know, it's not we need to print different books, different cards, different people, different prices. You can just pop a membership out there, you know, so let's do this, you know, small waters membership, send it by email. Here's a link, guys, promotional code for it, or whatever you might well like. And it's as simple as that. And then within 1 minute, you've got a bonus membership. And we do, especially more on carp fisheries, but, you know, we do promotional tickets. You know, you can either have a winter ticket or you can have a one-off special offer or a half price, or, you know, things like that become a very fast thing to do and very intuitively fast thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully. So assessing more water is the next step. And obviously, I think we've spoken quite a lot previously about how pressure is your biggest worry. You know, angling pressure is probably your biggest concern, because you don't want to make what you've got worse. You know, where you sat there with a cap on members, and you're sat with a huge waiting list. What you don't need to do is really try hard to get more people fishing, because you're at the limit of what you want.
Exactly.
So more water has got to be key to that. Do you find, one last question before we do go, have you got any issues with lease prices, you know, the prices of your lease fees or anything like that? I know course angling clubs struggle with this, and I know the game fishing clubs have probably got a reasonable amount of money, and you're probably not struggling, especially with a waiting list like that. In course club, the problem is there's a kind of parity in pricing, because you know, land agents who don't fish look at the price of leasing water and average it across game and course, and it looks very expensive for game clubs and very cheap for course clubs, you know, very expensive for course clubs. And in many cases, they're asking for thousands and thousands of pounds for what in course fishing people are paying 20 quid for.
We had it's quite funny. We had an interesting meeting with one of the big estates we went for back in February, I think it was, to renew the 3-year lease. And the land agent's a pretty hard-nosed guy. And he asked what the membership was, and I said, it was quite funny actually, I said what it was, and he said, that's very cheap. And then our treasurer steps in and says, yeah, by the time we've been at John Norris's for 6 times, it ends up very expensive, actually. You know, people love it. But our leases in general, like the ones we did the 2 big ones earlier this year, the 2 biggest ones, most important ones, and it's certainly expensive ones, and they went up 10%, which I don't think was outrageous. So it's interesting actually. We share the Eden. There's some big clubs. We're the local, obviously Penrith. I'm sure everybody would have heard of Prince Albert. Prince Albert have fishing on the Emont. Have they got the Eden as well, Jeff? They got bits on the Emont, haven't they?
Yeah, they've got bits on the Emont and the Eden, but mainly Lower Eden. Oh no, they've got water north of Penrith at Lazenby on the
Oh, that's
Eden,
right. Yeah,
and
yeah,
then it's Lower Eden round Carlisle
yeah.
area.
And there's another Yorkshire club. Both of them have a lot of money, I would suspect. And if some good water comes up, you are in danger of getting into a bidding war over it.
It's very hard. Prince Albert, by the way, for anyone that doesn't know, biggest club in Europe.
Yeah,
They're the largest angling club in Europe, currently standing at over 12,000 members.
Yeah, well, if they're in for water, we just can't compete. There's no.
They just buy everyone out of everything. And I mean, fair play to them for what they've achieved with an angling club. But you know, you can't compete against someone that's got 12,000 members paying several £100s a year.
yeah.
Their waiting list is bigger than most every club in this room. Their waiting list is longer than that.
Yeah. You've where prices are going up, you've just got to suck it and pay it. Because I think that the day you turn around and start saying, well, that's a bit too much, somebody like Prince Albert or this Yorkshire club will probably just walking away with a big check in front of them. So there is a slight worry. I mean, we do own some water, and ideally, if we could actually in the future purchase some water, which we're probably in a position to do, we feel that would secure the club a lot. If we lost water, it is in our rules that we can sort of cut the membership down. So if for example, if we lost a big stretch of water and we thought we had to cut membership down, we are actually allowed to do that. How we'd actually go around it, Christ only knows. But so it is a bit of a worry, but we do get a lot of good feedback and a lot of good feeling from landowners because we're the local club. And I think, and the other thing that the new committee have done, we've sort of formed a subcommittee. Sounds a bit grand, but three of us, like the chairman, the secretary, and the chairman, myself, and the treasurer, have made a point of going around to see and introduce ourselves to landowners as leases have come up, and that seems to have paid off quite well as well.
I mean, I fully agree on that one. There's been this. Again, this is the kind of meeting of worlds, you know, the old and the new. Anglers very much used to be the guys with muddy boots on. You know, they used to walk in dirty, covered in, you know, in our world, covered in ground bait and bream slime. You know, in your world, you know, covered in mud and, you know, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
You've got to go have these conversations in a professional environment, get to know people, humanize anglers, because, you know, angling has, again, become that sport of weird old men. You know, we were seen as kind of the strangers on the riverbank now.
Yeah.
You know, paddle boarders are popular, you know, wakeboarders are popular, walkers are popular, cyclists are popular, the anglers are in the way. So you do need to embed yourself in those community events. And earlier this week, I did a community litter pick with 40 people from local businesses. And, you know, the council love it, you know, all these things love it. You've got to do that to embed yourself in communities and with your landowners, you know, all kinds of different, you know, stakeholders in the community. So again, good to hear. So I think we'll round it off from there. The one thing I'll say is, you know, I'm really grateful for you for coming tonight, Andrew and Jeff. Penrith really do stand out in the game fishing world. It's really well thought of, and you've been a fantastic client in our first year. And far from what you said earlier, Andrew, you are nothing like a pain to me. It's a pleasure, and it's always a pleasure when we get people that are happy to just engage and ask nice questions. You know, when you're ringing up and just, you know, send us a message to ask a nice question, it's fantastic because we can help you. You know, we're there to support you through the whole thing. And as you've probably learned, no need to panic.
Exactly.
So thanks very much for coming. We're going to be running with another club 4 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now, we're doing a winter special. So we're going to be looking at getting the most out of your fishery this winter. And it's going to be a combination of downtime to do some fishery projects and also no downtime because you can still get people fishing. So keep an eye out for the invite for that one. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll say good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers out.
Thank you very much.
So, yeah.